The auctioneer's gavel came down with a crack that split the afternoon silence in two. $7. That was the price of everything I would ever own. 80 acres of dead grass, and a house that the locals called the Coffin. A barn that leaned like a drunk on his last legs. A truck rusted into the dirt of a garage nobody had opened in 6 years. $7. I was 18 years old. I had $12 left in my pocket. And I was standing in the middle of a Montana field staring at the only thing in the world that belonged to me. But before I tell you about the land, I have to tell you about the courtroom, because that is where the story really begins. Not in a bus station, not at an auction. In a wood-paneled room in Rimrock County, Montana, in the autumn of 2018, where a man named Royce Brennan sat across the aisle from me with 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than I had ever earned in my life. I was wearing a gray dress I had bought for $9 at a thrift store. My hands were folded in my lap so they would not shake. Beside me sat a man named Walt Doolittle, 74 years old. White hair cut close to the scalp. A retired sheriff with hands like leather and eyes that had seen the worst of men and learned to keep watching anyway. The judge was a woman named Patricia Reeves. Gray hair, spectacles, the kind of voice that did not need to be raised to be obeyed. She looked at me across the room. "Miss Wexler," she said, "tell me how this began." I took a breath. I looked at Royce Brennan. He was 58 years old, broad in the shoulders, gray at the temples. He had spent 30 years buying up land in this county one piece at a time, by every method, legal and otherwise. He had spent the last year of his life trying to take what was mine. He met my eyes and smiled. The same cold smile he had worn the first time he stood on my porch. I looked away from him and back to the judge. "It started with a cardboard box," I said, "and $7. And the room went quiet. I have to take you back now. Back before the courtroom. Back before the auction. Back to a Tuesday morning in March of 2015, when I was 16 years old, and the only thing I owned in this world was the name on my birth certificate and the clothes on my back. The cafeteria at St. Augustine's smelled like every cafeteria I had ever known. Powdered milk, cold oatmeal, cleaning solution thinned too far with water. I'd eaten breakfast in that room for 12 years. The same gray walls, the same scratched table by the window, the same view of the parking lot where social workers came and went, taking some children home and leaving others behind. I was always one of the others. When you are 16 in the foster system, you understand something the younger children do not. You understand that the doors have closed. Adoptive parents come looking for babies, sometimes for toddlers, almost never for teenagers. By the time you are 13, the file with your name on it gets thinner every year. By 16, it is just paperwork waiting for the day you turn 18 and the state can hand you a check and forget you ever existed. That morning, Mrs. Whitfield came for me after breakfast. She was a woman worn down by 22 years of running a place where children went to be forgotten. Not unkind, just exhausted. Her smile had the softness of bad news. "Sage," she said, "come to my office, please." I followed her down the hallway I had walked 1,000 times, past the bulletin board with its faded posters about brushing your teeth and finishing your homework, past the rec room where a television played to children who were not watching, past the front window where the light came in pale and gray and ordinary. In her office, Mrs. Whitfield handed me a small cardboard box and a manila envelope. "These are your mother's effects," she said. "We have held them in storage since you came to us. You are old enough now." I stared at the box. It was small enough to hold in one hand. 12 years of my life had passed in this place, and this was all that remained of the woman who had given birth to me. "What about my file?" I asked. "Is there anything else, family? Anyone?" Mrs. Whitfield shook her head. The softness in her eyes was the kind that meant she had already given me everything she had to give. "Your mother died in a car accident when you were 4, she said. "No father listed. No known relatives. I'm sorry, Sage. There is nothing else." She gave me $175 in an envelope. State allowance, enough to last 2 weeks if I was careful. "Good luck," she said. That was goodbye. 16 years old, and the system was done with me. I opened the box that night in a bus station in Lincoln, Nebraska. I had bought a ticket west because west felt like possibility. I had no plan beyond getting somewhere I had never been. Inside the box were 3 things. A silver ring tarnished almost black with the initials SW etched on the inside. A folded paper that turned out to be my birth certificate. Mother, Celine Wexler. Father, unknown. Place of birth, Billings, Montana. And a photograph. It was a Polaroid, soft at the edges, the colors faded by time. A woman stood in front of a white farmhouse with one hand shading her eyes from the sun. She was young, 17, maybe 18. She was smiling in a way that looked almost defiant, like she was daring the camera to take something from her she was not yet ready to give. Behind her, the farmhouse rose against a blue sky. A porch wrapped around the front. A barn sat in the distance. Fields stretched to a horizon that seemed to go on forever. On the back, in careful cursive, someone had written, "Mama's Place, Rimrock, Montana, 1997. I turned the photograph over and looked at the woman again. At my mother. I had her eyes, dark brown, almost black in the wrong light. I had her chin, too, the stubborn jut that Mrs. Whitfield used to call my difficult face. But I did not have her smile. I did not have whatever it was that let a person stand in the sun and look at the world like the world owed her something good. I had nothing, except now I had a place. Now I had a name. Rimrock, Montana. That was enough to start moving. There is a way of telling a story where the bad years go by fast, where 2 years of a life can be summed up in a sentence, and we move on to the part that matters. I'm going to do that here. Not because those years did not matter. They did. They taught me everything I know about what it means to survive when nobody is looking. But this story is not about the surviving. It is about what came after. I worked. That is the simple version. I washed dishes in a diner outside Cheyenne until the owner's son cornered me in the storage room and I had to leave fast in the middle of the night with my pay still in the register. I picked apples in an orchard near Bozeman until the season ended, and the foreman shrugged and said there was nothing else. I cleaned motel rooms in a town so small it did not have a name on the map. I slept in bus stations when I could afford the ticket. I slept in shelters when they had a bed. I slept behind a laundromat one November and woke up with frost in my hair. But every library I passed, I stopped. Every computer with internet access, I searched. Rimrock, Montana Wexler family. Rimrock, Montana farm. Rimrock, Montana, 1997. For 18 months, I found nothing. And then in the public library in Billings, Montana, in March of 2017, I found everything. The records were in the county clerk's archive, digitized, but buried in a database nobody ever opened. Property records, tax documents, the bones of a place called Rimrock. I learned that Rimrock had once been a real town. 300 people at its peak in the 1940s, a feed store, a church, a school, farms spreading out in all directions following the river until it ran dry every summer. Now the population was listed as 800. Most of the young people had left. The school had closed in 1998. The church held services once a month when the circuit preacher made his rounds, but the property records still existed. And in those records I found her, May Wexler, 80 acres, Section 12, Township 4 North. Primary residence, 1 farmhouse, 1 barn, various outbuildings. Property acquired 1955. May Wexler had been my great-grandmother. She had owned the farm in that photograph. She had lived there for 60 years. According to the county records, she had died in 2012 at the age of 84. 5 years before I started looking, I sat in front of that library computer for a long time, just staring at the screen. My great-grandmother. Family. Real family. Someone who might have known my mother. Someone who might have known me. But she was gone, and the farm was listed as abandoned. Property taxes unpaid. Estimated debt $1,500. And at the bottom of the record in red letters a notice. Property scheduled for county auction. Date, March 15th. Minimum bid $5. I looked at the calendar in the corner of the screen. It was March 12th. I had 3 days. I hitched a ride with a farmer hauling feed to a ranch outside Rimrock. He was a quiet man named Earl, who did not ask questions, and I was grateful for it. He let me out at the intersection of 2 dirt roads and pointed toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. "Town's that way," he said. "What's left of it?" I thanked him and started walking. Rimrock looked like a place that was slowly forgetting it existed. The main street had 6 buildings and 3 of them were boarded up. A feed store anchored one end. Its sign faded but still legible. A diner sat at the other end with smoke rising from the chimney. Between them, a hardware store, a church, and 2 empty storefronts stared at each other across cracked pavement. I found the county clerk's office in a building that also served as the post office and the library. The woman behind the counter was named Doris. She took my questions without much interest. "Auction is tomorrow at 10, she said. "Courthouse. You planning to bid?" "Maybe." She looked me over. 18 years old. Dirty backpack. Clothes that had seen too many dryers. Her expression did not change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "That Wexler place has been empty 6 years, she said. "Roof is half gone. Pipes froze and burst. Nobody has touched it since the old woman died." "I know. Going to take more than $5 to make it livable." "I know that too." Doris shrugged. "Your funeral." She did not know how right she was. The auction took place in a room that smelled like dust and old wood. 6 people sat in folding chairs, all of them old enough to be my grandparents. A man in a rumpled suit read from a clipboard, his voice flat and bored. There were 4 properties on the list: an empty lot, a burned-out gas station, 30 acres of scrubland nobody wanted, and the Wexler farm. The first 3 sold fast, 100 here, 50 there. The men in folding chairs bid without enthusiasm, like they were buying expired groceries out of habit. Then the clerk got to the last item. Wexler property, 80 acres, Section 12, farmhouse, barn, outbuildings, condition as is. Minimum bid $5. He looked up. Nobody moved. The clock on the wall ticked. A fly buzzed against the window. The clerk cleared his throat. $5, anyone? I raised my hand. 7. A few heads turned. I saw amusement in their faces. Curiosity. The pity reserved for children who do not know any better. $7, the clerk repeated. Do I hear 8? Silence. Going once. He sounded almost surprised. Going twice? The gavel came down. Sold. I walked to the front of the room and signed my name on a piece of paper. My hand was shaking, but my signature was clear. Sage Wexler. The clerk handed me a receipt and a set of keys, so rusted they looked like they might crumble in my hand. "Congratulations," he said without warmth. "You have 90 days to pay $1,500 in back taxes. Otherwise, the county takes it back." I nodded. 90 days. $1,500. I had $40 left. No job. No skills. No one in the world who would notice if I disappeared. But I had something I had never had before. I had land. I had a name. For the first time in my life, I belonged somewhere. The walk to the farm took 2 hours. The road turned from pavement to gravel to dirt, winding through fields gone wild with neglect. Brown grass waved in the wind like an ocean. The sky stretched overhead bigger than any sky I had seen in my life. I had grown up in cities, in institutions, in places where the horizon was always blocked by buildings or fences or walls. Here, there was nothing between me and the edge of the world. It should have felt freeing. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff in a strong wind. Because the closer I got to the farm, the more I understood what I had bought. The house appeared first, rising from the prairie like something that had grown there by accident, and nobody had bothered to remove. White paint peeled from the clapboards in long curls. The porch sagged on the left side, one post missing entirely. 3 windows on the upper floor were dark holes where glass should have been. The roof was the worst. A corner of it had collapsed, a jagged wound in the wood exposing the attic to the sky. Even from the road, I could see the stains where rain had poured in and rotted everything it touched. Behind the house, the barn leaned at an angle that defied gravity, like someone had propped it against the wind and walked away. And everywhere, the grass had taken over, chest high in places, covering what might have been a garden, swallowing what might have been a path, reclaiming what people had once tried to build. I stood at the edge of the property for a long time. The wind pushed against my back like a hand, trying to guide me forward or warn me away. I thought about turning around. I could sell the keys to someone, hike back to town, keep moving the way I had been moving for 2 years, find another diner, another orchard, another laundromat to sleep behind. But I had tried that life already. I knew where it led. Nowhere. I took a breath and walked toward the house. The front door was not locked. It was not even closed all the way. The frame had warped so badly that the door sat at an angle, leaving a gap wide enough for animals to come and go. And they had. The smell hit me first. Mouse droppings, mold, the particular sweet-sour stench of a place left to itself. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The living room might have been beautiful once. High ceilings, a stone fireplace, windows that would have let in light on 3 sides. Now the plaster hung from the ceiling in long sheets. The floor was soft and treacherous with water damage. Some animal had built a nest in the corner. I moved through the rooms slowly, testing each step before I trusted my weight. Kitchen. Counters crumbled. Sink hanging loose from the wall. Bedroom. A mattress reduced to springs and mold. Bathroom. Better not to describe. But the bones were there. I could see them under the damage. Solid walls. Strong beams. A foundation that had held for almost a century. "The bones are good," I said out loud just to hear something besides the wind. My voice sounded small, hopeful, stupid. I kept moving. In what had been a back room, I found the first sign that someone had really lived here. A bookshelf still standing with books still on it. A rocking chair by the window, its cushion chewed but its frame intact. A basket of yarn, the colors faded but the wool still soft. And on the wall, photographs. I approached them carefully, afraid they might crumble at my touch. They were old, black and white. A man in overalls standing next to a tractor. A woman in a flowered dress holding a baby. Two children running toward the camera with their mouths open in laughter. And one photograph in a silver frame, placed alone at the center of the wall. A young woman standing in front of the farmhouse, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. My mother. I reached out and touched the glass. It was cool under my fingers. Real. She had stood in this room. She had looked at this photograph. She had been here. I sank down onto the floor and cried until I could not breathe. That night I slept in the truck. It was a Chevrolet pickup from 1987, rusted and dusty, parked in what had once been a garage behind the house. The keys were in the ignition. When I turned them, the engine coughed twice and died. But the cab was dry. The seats were cracked but not moldy. With my jacket as a blanket and my backpack as a pillow, it felt more like safety than anything I had known in years. The cold woke me before dawn. March in Montana is not kind to people sleeping in dead trucks. My breath came out in clouds. My fingers were stiff. When I finally got the door open and stepped outside, the frost crunched under my boots like broken glass. But the sky, I had never seen a sky like that. Pink and orange and gold spreading from the horizon like fire. The fields stretched out around me, silver with frost. And for a moment, I forgot the cold. I forgot the damage. I forgot the $1,500 I did not have, and the 90 days I could not waste. I just stood there and watched the sun rise on my land. My land. The words felt strange in my mouth, foreign, like a language I was only beginning to learn. But I practiced it anyway, standing there in the frozen grass, with my breath rising like smoke. My land. I went back to the photograph that morning. I took it down off the wall and sat with it on the floor of the back room and looked at it. The way you look at a face you have been trying to remember your whole life. My mother, Celine Wexler, 17 years old, smiling that defiant smile. But this time I noticed something I had missed before. There was a window behind her, glass catching the sun, and in that glass, faintly, you could see the reflection of the yard, the fence line, the dirt road that led away from the house, and on the road, standing at a distance, half hidden by the angle of the reflection, a man, young, tall, dark hair. He was not looking at the camera. He was looking at her, watching her have her picture taken. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the cold. I did not know who he was. I did not know if he mattered. But I knew what I felt looking at that figure in the glass. I felt the way an animal feels when it senses the predator before it sees it. I put the photograph down. I did not know what to do with that feeling. I did not know who that man was. So I tried to set it aside. There were more urgent things to worry about. The roof, the taxes, the cold. But I would remember that face. Later, I would understand exactly who I had been looking at. The first day passed in a blur of inventory. I walked the property, all of it, counted what I had. The house salvageable if I could close the roof before the spring rains. The barn dangerous, almost certainly beyond saving. the truck possibly fixable, a well that I did not yet know if it worked, 80 acres of fields that had not been planted in 15 years. And I read my great-grandmother's letter. I had found it in the cardboard box of my mother's things, folded so many times the creases had almost worn through. The handwriting was careful and old-fashioned. The ink faded to a soft brown. My dearest Celine, I do not know if you will ever come back. I pray every day that you will. But if you do not, I want you to know that I forgive you. I have always forgiven you. Whatever happened that night, whatever made you run, it does not matter. You are my granddaughter. You are my blood. And I love you. If you ever do come home, look under the barn. Your grandfather's hiding place. He built it during the war when he thought the world might end. I have kept it up. Everything you need to start over is there. Come home, Celine. Please. All my love. Grandma May. The letter was not dated, but it had been in my mother's things when she died, which meant my mother had kept it, carried it with her, never thrown it away. And that made me think she had meant to come back. Maybe she had tried. Maybe she had spent her short life planning to return to this place and never found the courage. I would never know. But I could find the hiding place. The barn was worse than the house. The main structure leaned so far to the east that I was afraid to breathe near it. Half the roof had collapsed. The smell of rotting hay and animal waste made my eyes water. But the floor was still there. Wooden planks warped and filthy, but solid when I tested them. I started in the corner, farthest from the collapse, feeling along the edges of each plank looking for a seam, a hinge, anything that suggested a door. It took me 2 hours. The hatch was in the second stall, hidden under a layer of dirt and hay so thick it looked like part of the floor. My boot caught on a metal ring I had thought was a piece of broken equipment. I pulled. The door was heavy. My arms burned. But slowly, inch by inch, it came up. Beneath it, wooden stairs descended into darkness. I used my phone for light. The battery was almost dead. But I did not care. The room below was small, maybe 8 feet by 8. The walls were lined with shelves. The shelves were lined with supplies. Canned food, some of it probably still good. Tools wrapped in oiled cloth. Seeds in sealed jars. A lantern. Matches. A first aid kit. And on a small table against the far wall, a metal box. I opened it with hands that would not stop shaking. Inside, I found $1,100 in cash. Mostly 20s and 10s, bundled with rubber bands that crumbled when I touched them. I found a leather journal, its pages yellow with age. I found letters, 47 of them, each in its own envelope, each addressed to Celine Wexler, each stamped "Return to Sender," and beneath the letters, tied with a faded ribbon, 13 birthday cards, one for every year since I'd been born. Each one addressed to Sage, because somehow my great-grandmother had known my name. I opened the first card. The paper was pink, with hand-drawn flowers along the edges. Happy 5th birthday, my dearest Sage. I do not know where you are. I do not know if you will ever read this. But I made you a card anyway, because somewhere in the world you are turning 5 today. And I want you to know that someone is thinking of you. Your great-grandmother, May. I opened the next one, and the next. Year after year of birthday wishes for a child she had never met. Each one filled with small updates about the farm, about the weather, about the cat she had adopted and named Hope. The last card was dated 3 months before she died. My 18th birthday. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. Happy 18th birthday, Sage. You are a woman now, old enough to find your way home. I have left everything for you, the money, the letters, the land. It is all waiting. Please come home. I do not have much time left, but I will hold on as long as I can. I love you. I have always loved you. Grandma May. She had died 11 days after writing those words. She had held on as long as she could. I had not come in time. I pressed the card to my chest and cried in the dark of that underground room until I was too tired to cry anymore. When I had nothing left, I picked up the journal. I did not expect what I found there. The journal was not what I thought it would be, not a diary, not memories of a quiet old woman. It was a record, page after page of dates and names. Conversations overheard at the feed store. License plates of trucks she did not recognize coming up her road at strange hours. Property line surveys. Tax records copied by hand. Photographs slipped between pages taken with an old camera through a kitchen window. And one name appeared again and again. Royce Brennan. I did not know who he was, not yet. But by the time I closed the journal, I understood that my great-grandmother had been afraid of him. And I understood something else. She had not been waiting passively in this farmhouse for 30 years. She had been gathering, watching, building something. A patient, careful, methodical case against a man who thought she was nothing but a stubborn old woman. I turned to the last entry. Dated 2012, just weeks before she died. The handwriting was weaker than the rest, but the words were steady. Royce thinks I have forgotten. He is wrong. 30 years I have written it all down. The original homestead papers are with Walt. When my granddaughter comes home, all of it will fall on him. I read those words 3 times. The original homestead papers are with Walt. When my granddaughter comes home, she had known. Somehow, in those last days, she had known I was coming. Or she had hoped. She had left a path. The hatch. The journal. The money to keep me alive long enough to find the rest. And a name I did not yet know how to follow. Walt. I sat in the dark with the journal open on my knees, and the cards spread around me on the floor. Outside, the wind moved across 80 acres of frozen ground. The house above me settled and creaked. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once, and then was silent. I was 18 years old. I had bought a dying farm for $7. I had 90 days, $1,500 I did not have. And the ghost of a great-grandmother who had spent the last 30 years of her life building a case I did not yet understand. And somewhere in this county, a man named Royce Brennan was about to find out that the granddaughter she had been waiting for had finally come home. I closed the journal. I climbed the wooden stairs out of the hiding place and let the hatch fall shut behind me. The sun was rising over the fields. The frost was beginning to melt. The day was beginning. My first day. On my land. I came up out of the hiding place into a different morning. The sun had cleared the eastern hills. Frost was retreating from the grass in patches. Somewhere a meadowlark was calling. The air smelled of cold earth and something faint and green underneath the first whisper. That winter was loosening its hand on the prairie. I stood on the porch of the coffin house with the journal under my arm and the leather of it warm against my ribs. Royce Brennan. I did not know yet what he looked like. I did not know what he had done to my mother. I did not know that within a week he would be standing on this porch with a smile like winter ice offering me money to leave. I only knew that my great-grandmother had spent 30 years writing down his sins, and she had left them to me. The first thing I learned about working on a dying farm is that everything depends on something else. The roof needs nails. The nails need money. The money needs a job. The job needs a way to get into town. The way into town is a truck that has not run since 2012. The truck needs a battery, a carburetor, an alternator, and a faith in the mechanical that I did not yet possess. So I started where I could. I started with the leaks. The roof had 2 collapses I could not fix and 7 smaller wounds I could. I climbed up there on my second morning with a hammer borrowed from the mudroom and tar paper salvaged from the barn loft. The tar paper was old. Some of it crumbled in my hands, but enough of it held. I worked from sunup to dusk. I learned that a hammer feels different in your hand after the first hour, after the third hour, after the 7th. I learned that the small bones of your wrist can ache in a way that does not stop when you stop using them. I learned to hold nails in my mouth like the men in the old photographs. I learned to spit them out one at a time as my hand asked for them. By the end of the second week, the smaller wounds were closed. The 2 big ones I could not reach. They sat above the kitchen and the back bedroom like open mouths. When the rain came, water poured down the inside walls in thin black streams. But I was holding the line. 3 weeks in, I walked into Rimrock for the first time as a property owner. The walk took 2 hours. The dirt road curved through fields gone yellow with old grass. A few cows watched me from across a fence. The wind was at my back, pushing me toward town, like it wanted me to get there before something happened. The feed store sat at the north end of Main Street. The sign over the door read, Callaway Feed and Hardware. The paint was faded, but the letters were still strong. A bell rang when I pushed the door open. The smell inside was molasses and grain dust, and old wood and oil. A woman behind the counter looked up. She was 71 years old. White hair cropped close to her head. Hands rough as tree bark. Eyes the pale blue of a winter sky that missed nothing. "You the girl who bought the Wexler place," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am." She studied me for a long moment. The kind of look that worked its way down from your hairline to your boots and back up again. I held still and let her look. "You know May Wexler," she said. "She was my great-grandmother." Something shifted in her face, not surprise, something deeper, like a door being unlocked from the inside. "You look like her," she said, "around the jaw. That stubborn set. Did you know her?" 60 years, she said. "Friends, 60 years. She used to come in here every Thursday. Bought her supplies. Stayed to talk. When she got too sick to drive, I brought things out to her." She paused. Her eyes did not leave my face. "She talked about Celine all the time," she said. "Her granddaughter, the one who left. She never stopped believing Celine would come back." "Celine was my mother," I said. "She died when I was 4. The woman was very still, the kind of stillness that costs something. "May did not know that," she said. "She would have moved heaven and earth to find you if she had known." "I know. I read her letters." The woman was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, a truck rolled past on Main Street. A dog barked somewhere down the block. "My name is Hattie Callaway," she said. "Welcome home." I did not have words for that. She did not seem to need them. "What did you come in for?" she said. "Nails, tar paper, whatever I can afford with $17. She did not laugh. She did not smile. But something in her shoulders eased. I have damaged inventory in back, she said. Tarps with small holes, nails that got wet and rusted. Not worth selling. Still usable if you do not mind the imperfections. I cannot pay much. I was not asking about money. I felt something loosen in my chest. The first kindness I had been offered in longer than I could remember. Yes, I said. I can use it. That was how I met Beckett Halloran. He was in the back of the store when Hattie sent me to load the damaged tarps into a wheelbarrow. He was 23 years old, tall, dark-haired. Irish Anglo features, the kind that did not give much away. He was hauling 50-pound bags of feed off a delivery truck, one on each shoulder like the weight did not exist. He looked at me once, nodded, went back to work. The second time I saw him, I was struggling to load a roll of damaged tarp into May's old truck. I had gotten the engine running by then, mostly through stubbornness and a YouTube video about carburetors I had watched on the library computer. But my arms were not strong enough to lift the heavy plastic alone. Beckett appeared beside me without a word, grabbed one end of the tarp, waited for me to grab the other, helped me load it into the bed. Thanks, I said. He nodded. That was our entire conversation. But over the weeks that followed, he started showing up at the farm, not to talk, just to work. He would arrive in the morning with a thermos of coffee and a bag of tools I did not own. He would spend 3 hours on something I could not have done alone. The roof, a wall, a beam that needed bracing. He would leave before dark, without saying goodbye. When I asked him why, he shrugged. Hattie sent me. Later, I would find out that was only half true. Hattie had asked him to check on me once. The rest he was doing on his own. Your great-grandmother helped my mother once, he said finally. About the 10th time I asked. She was a midwife, delivered me when the roads were too icy to get to a hospital. My mother would have died without her. He looked at the house, at the patches we had made, at the work still left to do. Debts do not go away just because people die, he said. The third person who held me up was Pearl Stanton. She was 52 years old, a widow. She ran the only diner in Rimrock. It was not much. 6 booths, a counter with stools, a kitchen that had not been updated since 1985. But it was warm, and the coffee was hot, and the food was honest. Pearl hired me to wash dishes 3 nights a week. Minimum wage. Cash. No questions asked. May used to come here every Sunday after church, she told me on my first night, leaning against the counter while I scrubbed a stock pot in the back sink. Same booth every time. Same order. Coffee. Apple pie. Whatever gossip she had collected during the week. She smiled at the memory, the way you smile at a friend who is gone. She talked about Celine all the time, her granddaughter who left, showed me pictures, told me stories. She was so sure Celine would come back someday. She looked at me. I guess she was right. Just not the way she expected. I worked at that diner for 3 months, scrubbing pots until my hands cracked open along the knuckles, mopping floors until my back ached at every step, eating whatever Pearl could not sell, which was sometimes the only food I had all day. It was not glamorous, but it was a paycheck, and a paycheck meant nails, and nails meant a roof, and a roof meant I might survive the winter. And then he came. Royce Brennan owned the largest ranch in Rimrock County, 2,000 acres on both sides of the river. He raised cattle. He grew wheat. He employed half the people in town, which meant everyone in town owed him something. He came to see me on a morning in late October, when the first real cold had settled in, and I was wearing every piece of clothing I owned at once. His truck was new. His boots were clean. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Miss Wexler," he said. The way he said my name made it sound like something he had scraped off the bottom of his boot. "I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." He was 58 years old, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples. He carried himself like a man who had never been told no by anyone he could not afford to ignore. I knew his face the moment I saw him. I had seen it in the reflection in my mother's photograph. A younger version, dark-haired instead of gray, but the same shape, the same set of the mouth. He had been the man on the road, the man watching her have her picture taken. In 1997, when my mother was 17, when Royce Brennan would have been 37 years old. A grown man, watching a girl. Something cold and steady moved through me. I did not let it show in my face. "What can I do for you?" I said. "I wanted to make you an offer." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. He did not hand it to me. He held it out between two fingers like he was offering bait to a small animal. $3,000 for the property, as is. You can be gone by the end of the week. I did not take the paper. I did not look at it. The property is not for sale. Everything is for sale, sweetheart. It is just a matter of price. His smile widened. The smile of a man who had said this sentence 1,000 times and watched it work 1,000 times. You are young. You do not understand how things work out here. This land is isolated, hard to access, expensive to maintain. You will burn through whatever money you have by spring. And then what? Then I will figure something out, the way my great-grandmother did. The smile vanished. May was a stubborn old woman, refused every offer I made, sat out here alone for years watching her farm fall apart around her. Is that what you want? I met his eyes. They were pale gray, like ice over water. My great-grandmother kept this land in my family for 60 years, I said. I intend to do the same. His jaw tightened. For just a second, something flickered behind those pale eyes. Something that was not amusement. Something that remembered being told no by the woman whose blood was in my veins. You have 90 days to pay the back taxes, he said. If you miss the deadline, the county takes the land, and I will be there to buy it. Then I had better not miss the deadline. He stared at me a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. Your grandmother used to say the same thing, he called over his shoulder. Stubborn, just like her. We will see how that works out for you. He drove off into the gray afternoon. Dust rose behind his truck and settled slowly back to the road. I stood on the porch until I could no longer hear his engine. Then I went inside, opened my great-grandmother's journal, and started to read it from the beginning. This time I knew his face. What I read in that journal kept me up for 3 nights. It started in 1985. Royce Brennan had been 25 years old, new to the county, married into money on a ranch his wife's father had built. May had written down the first time he came to her gate. He wants the south pasture, says it would round out his line. Offered $800 an acre. I told him no. He smiled like I had told him a joke. Then 1989, he came back, offered $1,000. I told him no again. He stayed in the truck this time, did not get out. Just looked at the house a long time before he drove away. Then 1992, a neighbor named Talbot Crane who owned 40 acres east of mine sold to Royce for half what the land was worth. Talbot was 81 years old and getting forgetful. His son said he had not understood the papers he was signing. Then, 1996, my uncle, by marriage, Theo Wexler, was diagnosed with dementia. He owned a strip of land that ran along my access road. May had written this in capital letters and underlined it twice. Someone has to protect Theo. Then, 1998, Royce Brennan came to Theo's house with a notary and a stack of papers. He paid $200 for the strip of land that controlled access to my farm. Theo signed his name in handwriting May described as not his own. Theo died 3 months later. And then there was Celine. May had written about my mother in tighter, smaller letters, as if even on the page she did not want to take up too much space with that grief. Celine came home crying tonight, would not say what was wrong. Royce's truck was on the river road. He has been around her at the school. The teacher told me. I asked Celine and she would not answer me. She is 17 years old and she is afraid of something she will not name. Then a week later, Celine says she has evidence. She will not show me what. She says it could put a man like that in prison. I told her to give it to me, to go to the sheriff. She is afraid. Sheriff Cal Brennan is Royce's first cousin. She does not trust him. Then a week after that, in handwriting that shook, Celine is gone. She left a note. She said she had to disappear before he hurt me too. She said one day she would come home. She said she loved me. Then the long silence, page after page of nothing, empty months, empty years. The slow grind of a woman waiting for a granddaughter who never came back. Cards written and unsent. Letters mailed and returned. A private investigator hired. And a private investigator who took the money and brought back nothing. And then, near the end of the journal, this. If I write it all down, maybe one day someone will find it. Maybe Celine. Maybe her child if she had one. Maybe nobody. But I cannot let him win in silence. He counts on the silence. He counts on the old people dying without telling. I will not be one of them. The original homestead papers are with Walt. I closed the journal at 3 in the morning and sat on the floor of the back room and stared at the photograph of my mother, 17 years old. Defiant smile. The reflection of a man on the road behind her. She had not run away from her family. She had been driven away. And she had spent the rest of her short life carrying a secret she could not put down. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, I got in May's old truck and drove to find Walt Doolittle. The cabin sat about 6 miles east of town, on a stretch of the river, where the cottonwoods grew thick and old. The road was barely a road, 2 ruts running through tall grass. The cabin itself was small, cedar siding gone silver with weather, a stone chimney, a porch with a single rocking chair on it. A man was sitting in the chair. He had a cup of coffee in one hand and a book in the other. White hair cropped close to his head. 74 years old. The kind of stillness that comes from a life of watching. He did not get up when I parked. He did not look surprised to see me. I walked across the yard with the journal in my hand and the photograph in my coat pocket and the original birth certificate in an envelope under my arm. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. My name is Sage Wexler, I said. May Wexler was my great-grandmother. She left a note that said you would be holding something for me. Walt set down his book. He set down his coffee. He looked at me for a long, quiet moment. I have been waiting for you for 20 years, child, he said. Come on inside. The cabin was clean. Books on every wall. A small kitchen. A wood stove. A desk by the window where a tin trunk sat under a wool blanket. Walt pulled the blanket back. The trunk was old. Army surplus painted dark green, the latches worn smooth from use. "I was sheriff of this county for 26 years, he said. "Before that, I was a deputy. Before that, I came home from a job I did not love and went into the only line of work my father knew." His voice was slow, steady. The voice of a man who had learned long ago that words used carefully were stronger than words used freely. In 1998, a girl came into my office. She was 17 years old. She said her name was Celine Wexler. She had a folder of evidence about a man named Royce Brennan. He was looking at the trunk, not at me. "What kind of evidence?" I said. "Forged signatures, property records, a tape recording of a conversation she had taped from her aunt's house when Royce didn't know the recorder was on. Pictures of him with a girl who was younger than her. Names, dates. Enough to send him to prison for a long time if any of it had ever been heard in a courtroom." He took a breath. "I told her I would help her. I told her to come back the next day. That night, my superior officer called me at home. Sheriff Cal Brennan, Royce's cousin. He told me he had received a complaint from a citizen and that he would be handling it personally. He told me that if I valued my career and my family's safety, I would forget I had ever met that girl." He looked up at me. I did not forget, but I did obey. I gave the sheriff the case file. He buried it in 24 hours. The girl never came back to my office. I went looking for her 2 weeks later. She was already gone. He paused. 3 days after she disappeared, I drove out to May's farm. I told May everything I knew. I told her I had failed her granddaughter. I told her I would resign by the end of the year. He almost smiled. It did not reach his eyes. May told me not to resign. She told me to stay where I was, to keep my eyes open, to write down everything I saw. She said one day somebody was going to come back and finish what Celine had started. And on that day, she said she wanted somebody on the inside who had been keeping records. "How long did you stay?" "Until 2014, 2 years after May died. I retired the day I turned 70. I walked out with everything I had collected, and I brought it to this cabin. And I have been waiting for somebody to come up that road and ask the right question." He opened the trunk. Inside were files, hundreds of them, manila folders thick with paper, photographs in plastic sleeves, cassette tapes labeled in May's careful handwriting and in Walt's blockier print, a bound notebook of property records, a second notebook of names, a third notebook of dates and license plates and movements of trucks at strange hours, 30 years. 2 patient old people, one waiting for a girl who never came back, the other waiting for a girl who was about to. "Your great-grandmother was not just a farmer, Sage Wexler," Walt said quietly. "She was the most patient witness I ever knew. And she trusted me with the thing she would not trust to a bank or a lawyer or a sheriff. The original federal homestead papers from 1923, filed by your great-great-grandfather when he claimed this land out of nothing." He pulled a long, flat, oilcloth-wrapped bundle from the bottom of the trunk. "These papers are why Royce Brennan is going to lose," he said. "But you are not ready to know that part yet. Not until you are ready to fight. Are you ready, Sage?" I looked at him. I thought about my mother at 17, alone, terrified, running into the dark. I thought about my great-grandmother alone, 84 years old, keeping a list of every move a predator made in her county. I thought about the cold floor of an underground room and the cards she had written for me every year of a life she did not know I was living. "I am ready," I said. Walt nodded. "Then come back next week. I have a lot to teach you." The week after that was the week the barn fell. Beckett was helping me reinforce a beam in the back stall. The structure was more unstable than we had thought. We had been working under the leaning roof for almost an hour. I was holding a brace at the far end. He was driving a long bolt through the joint above me. I heard the crack before I saw it. The beam splitting, the roof giving way. Beckett's shout as he dove sideways hit me at the waist and pushed me clear. The falling timber caught his shoulder, drove him into the frozen ground. I do not remember screaming. I do not remember running for help. I just remember his face going gray with pain as I tried to dig him out from under the debris with my bare hands. His shoulder was dislocated. 2 ribs were cracked. He would be okay, the doctor at the clinic said, but he needed rest, weeks of it. Hattie came to the hospital. She did not yell. That was almost worse. "I told you that place would kill someone," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. "I told you and you did not listen. Hattie, I am sorry. Don't." She held up a hand. "Beckett is my responsibility. I should not have let him go out there. That is on me." She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I had never seen in them before. Blame. "Stay away from him," she said. "Stay away from both of us." She left. Beckett was transferred to his mother's house in the next county. He texted me once. "I am okay. Don't worry. I will be back when I can." But when he can was not now, and now was all I had. 2 days later, a sheriff's deputy I did not recognize came up my drive in a county truck. He handed me a folded piece of paper and would not meet my eyes. It was a notice from the building inspector. The barn was being condemned. I had 30 days to demolish it at my own expense, or the county would do it for me and bill me. The inspector had been to my property exactly once, to attend a barbecue at Royce Brennan's ranch a year and a half earlier. The same week, Royce bought the building that housed Pearl Stanton's diner. He doubled her rent overnight. She could not pay. "I am sorry, honey," she told me, tears in her eyes. "I cannot afford to keep you on. I cannot afford to keep the lights on." The diner closed 2 weeks later. Pearl moved to Billings to live with her sister. The building stood dark on Main Street like a tooth knocked out of a mouth. And just like that, I was alone. No Beckett, no Hattie, no Pearl, no job, just me, the broken house, 20 days until the tax deadline, and the slow, careful, patient pressure of a man who had been doing this to people for 30 years. That was when the fire started. It was a Tuesday night in early November. The temperature had dropped to 10 below zero. Snow was on the ground. I had been in the kitchen heating water on the wood stove when I heard a sound from the direction of the barn, a clink, like glass on metal. I went to the window. A figure was moving in the dark beside the barn, a flashlight in one hand, something heavy in the other. He was walking slowly, deliberately, splashing the side of the barn with whatever was in the can. The smell of gasoline reached me through the crack window. I do not remember thinking. I went to the corner of the kitchen where I had been keeping May's old shotgun, a Stevens 12-gauge from 1962. I had taught myself to load it from a YouTube video the week after I read the journal. I put 2 shells in the chamber. I went out the back door barefoot in my coat and pajamas into the snow. He had a lighter in his hand by the time I reached the corner of the barn, a cheap silver thing, the kind you buy at a gas station. He flicked it once and the flame caught. I racked the shotgun. The sound is unmistakable. There is no other sound like it on earth. He froze. "Drop it," I said. He dropped the lighter. It hit the snow and went out. He turned slowly. He was wearing a black ski mask. I could see his eyes. They were wide and white and afraid. "Pick it up," I said. "Throw it to me, then run." He hesitated. "I have killed coyotes from twice this far in worse light," I said. "Pick it up." He bent slowly, picked up the lighter, threw it underhand. It landed in the snow at my feet. Then he ran. He ran across the field in the moonlight, stumbling in the deep snow toward whatever vehicle he had left out by the road. I let him go. I had no interest in shooting a man over a can of gasoline. I had something better. When he was out of sight, I bent and picked up the lighter. I held it up to the porch light. It was a chrome Zippo, the kind ranch hands carried. Engraved on the side in a curling brand were the words, "Brennan Cattle Company." I went back inside. I put the lighter in a sealed plastic bag. I put the bag in the metal box from the hiding place. I sat down at the kitchen table and watched my hands shake for a long time. I did not sleep that night. I drove out to Walt's cabin in the morning with the lighter on the seat beside me. Walt looked at it for a long time. He looked at me. "You did right," he said. "You kept the evidence. You kept your nerve. You did not pull that trigger. That is exactly what I would have told you to do." He turned the lighter in his fingers. "The man who carried this is not Royce. He is a hand. Royce will deny he ever met him, but the lighter is enough for a pattern, enough for a story, enough that when we get to court, it has a place. When we get to court. When." He looked at me steadily. "Not if." He paused. "There is something I need to tell you, Sage. I've been waiting to tell you. I think you are ready to hear it." He went to the trunk. He pulled out the oilcloth bundle. He laid the original 1923 federal homestead papers on the table between us. "These say your great-great-grandfather did not buy this land," Walt said quietly. "He claimed it under the Federal Homestead Act of 1862. There is a clause in those claims that almost no one remembers anymore, a trust clause. The land cannot be sold to any party who is not in the direct family line, not without a federal review." He looked up. "That strip of land that Royce bought from your great-uncle Theo in 1998, the strip that controls your access road, under federal law it was never his to buy. The transaction is void on its face, and it was void from the moment it happened. Why has nobody known this for 30 years? Walt almost smiled. "Because your great-grandmother told me to keep it that way. She wanted Royce to spend 3 decades building an empire on that piece of stolen land, so that when somebody finally pulled the rug out from under him, he would have nothing to stand on." He folded the papers carefully, put them back in the oilcloth. She was a patient woman, Sage. She did not just want to win against him. She wanted him to lose everything. I drove home in the early dark with snow starting to fall. The day before Christmas Eve, the storm warning came across the radio in May's old truck. A blizzard out of Canada. 20 inches expected. 30 below at the worst of it. I had food. I had wood for the stove. I had patched the worst of the holes in the walls. I would be cold, but I would be alive. I sat by the wood stove that Christmas Eve and watched the fire die down. The wind shrieked against the corners of the house. Snow drove against the windows in waves. I thought about my mother. I thought about my great-grandmother. I thought about every cold place I'd ever slept in 2 years of running. I thought about Beckett somewhere in another county with his shoulder in a sling wondering when he could come back. I thought about Hattie sitting in her store with the lights off, hating me. I thought about Royce Brennan somewhere in a warm house, waiting for the storm to do his work for him. For a long minute I thought about walking out the door into the blizzard. about just lying down in the snow, about letting it end. I was 18 years old. I was tired. I had nothing, but I had something. I had a journal full of names. I had a homestead paper with a federal seal on it. I had a Zippo lighter in a plastic bag. I had a great-grandmother who had waited 30 years for me. I was not going to let her wait in vain. I fed the stove. I pulled my coat tighter. I picked up May's journal and started reading it again from the beginning. Around midnight, I saw the lights. They came down the road that led to my property. 2 yellow headlights, weaving badly. They were going too fast for the conditions, and they were going to miss the curve that ran along the gully. They missed it. The car slid sideways and came to a stop with its rear wheels spinning uselessly in the deep snow at the edge of my drive. I put on every layer I owned. I wrapped a scarf around my face until only my eyes showed. I grabbed the oil lantern off the kitchen table and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit me like a fist. My breath froze in the scarf within seconds. Every step into the wind was a knife in my lungs, but I kept moving. The car was a Honda Civic, completely wrong for that kind of weather. Inside, I could see shapes. 2 small, 1 adult. I banged on the window. A woman's face appeared. Dark hair, pale skin, terrified. I gestured for her to open the door. She did. "My children," she gasped. "Please, my children." In the back seat, 2 children huddled together under a single thin blanket. A boy, maybe 9 years old. A girl younger, 5, maybe 6. The girl was not moving. I do not remember carrying her to the house. I remember the weight of her in my arms, light as a bird. I remember the blue tinge to her lips. I remember the mother stumbling behind me through the snow with the boy sobbing into the wind. I remember getting them inside. I remember closing the door against the storm. And then everything became very simple. The girl was hypothermic. I had read about it in my great-grandmother's journal in the sections where she had written about her years as a midwife. The babies born in blizzards, the farmers who had fallen through the ice, the travelers who had gotten lost in storms. You could not warm them too fast. That was the thing. Too fast, and the cold blood rushed back to the heart and stopped it cold. You had to be slow, careful, patient. I wrapped the girl in dry blankets. I put her near the stove, but not too close. I told the mother to take off her wet clothes to put on dry ones and to hold her daughter against her own bare skin under the blankets. Sharing body heat the way mammals had done for 1,000,000 years. "She will be all right," I said. "She will be all right." I kept the fire burning. I heated water. I made broth from canned chicken and forced the mother to drink it. The boy sat on the floor by the stove, silent, watching everything with eyes that had seen too much. The storm raged. The girl did not move. And then around 4 in the morning, she cried. It was a weak sound, a whimper. But her mother heard it and started crying too. Holding her daughter so tight I was afraid she would stop her breathing all over again. "She is okay," I said. "She is going to be okay." The mother looked at me. Her name was Bridget Moray, I would learn later. She was 36 years old. She had been driving from Idaho to a job in North Dakota trying to outrun something that was not supposed to find her there. "You saved her," Bridget said. I did not know what to say to that. So I just kept feeding the fire. It was around dawn when the wind finally began to die down. Bridget was asleep on the couch with her daughter on her chest. The boy, whose name was Finn, had fallen asleep with his head on his mother's leg. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in my hands when Bridget stirred. She got up carefully so as not to wake the children. She walked to the kitchen on bare feet, wrapped in one of May's old quilts. She sat across from me. "Thank you," she said. "I do not know how to repay you." "You do not have to." She looked at me for a long time. "Where were you going?" I said. "North Dakota. There is a job at a meatpacking plant. I was supposed to be there yesterday. The car broke down twice already. I should have stopped. I just thought I could make it." "What are you running from?" She closed her eyes. "My husband died in 2014, she said. "It was on a ranch in Wyoming. They called it an accident. A barn fire. He was sleeping in the bunkhouse and they said the wiring was bad. Nobody else got hurt. Just him." She opened her eyes, looked straight at me. The ranch was owned by a man named Curtis Brennan, Royce Brennan's older brother. The kitchen went very still. "I have a notebook," she said. "I started keeping it after my husband died. I wrote down every name I heard around that family, every accident, every man who died in some quiet way on one of their properties. I am 36 years old, and I have a list of 9 names, Miss Wexler. 9 men dead in 15 years. None of them ever investigated past the first day." She paused. "I was told yesterday by a man I trust that the Brennan family had located me. That is why I left. That is why I was on that road in that storm. I was not coming here. I did not even know this place existed. I was just driving." I looked at her. I thought about the journal in my coat, about Walt's tin trunk, about 30 years of patient watching. I thought about a Zippo lighter in a plastic bag. I thought about a man on a road in a photograph in 1997. The storm of my life had been coming for me since before I was born, but it had also been bringing me everything I would need. "Bridget," I said quietly, "do not go to North Dakota. Stay here, you and the children, as long as you need to." She started to cry without making a sound. Outside the window, the first gray light of Christmas morning was beginning to show on the horizon. The wind was dying. The snow was slowing. And somewhere, in a warm house across the valley, Royce Brennan was about to find out that the granddaughter May Wexler had been waiting for had not come alone. She had come with witnesses. The 4 weeks between Christmas and the filing went past me like a river in spring flood, fast and cold and changing the shape of everything it touched. Bridget stayed. She and the children moved into the back bedroom 3 days after Christmas, the one I had cleared out and patched and put a small wood stove into. Finn and Hazel slept on a single mattress on the floor. Bridget slept in a chair beside them for the first week, until I finally convinced her to take May's old bed. The first morning they were settled, Bridget came down the stairs with a cardboard box in her arms. She set it on the kitchen table. She opened it. Inside were 3 composition notebooks, plain black covers, lined paper. The handwriting on the pages inside was small and tight and disciplined. "I told you I had a list," she said. "Here it is." I sat down across from her. I opened the first notebook. The first page was a name, a date, a place, and 3 paragraphs of what she knew. The second page was the same. The third, the fourth. 9 names, 15 years. Every one of them a man who had worked on a property owned by the Brennan family. Every one of them dead in some way that had been called an accident on the first day and never looked at again on the second. Tractor rollovers, stable fires, a drowning in a stock tank, a fall down a flight of stairs in a bunkhouse with no witnesses. Bridget's husband, Daniel, was the 7th name on the list. "How did you get all this?" I said. "Slowly. I worked at a courthouse in Wyoming for 2 years after Daniel died. I did filing for the county clerk. Nobody noticed a widow making photocopies. By the time they noticed I had what I have. She looked at me steadily. I was going to take this to the FBI in Bismarck. I had the number of an agent who answered an email I sent. He told me to come in person. Why North Dakota? Because Wyoming is theirs. Montana is theirs. South Dakota is theirs. North Dakota is the closest place that is not. I closed the notebook. I set my hand flat on the cover. Bridget, we do not have to drive to Bismarck. She waited. There is a man 6 miles east of here. His name is Walt Doolittle. He was sheriff of this county for 26 years. He has a tin trunk full of files my great-grandmother helped him build. He has been waiting his whole retirement for somebody to bring him the rest of the puzzle. Bridget closed her eyes. She did not cry. She had cried enough in her life. She just sat at my kitchen table with her hands flat beside the box and breathed slowly in and out for a long time. Then let us go see him, she said. We drove out to Walt's cabin the next morning. Walt was on the porch in his rocking chair. He saw the truck come up the road. He saw 2 women get out instead of 1. He stood up. I introduced them. I told Walt who Bridget was. I told Walt what was in the box she was carrying. Walt did not say anything for a long minute. Then he opened the cabin door and held it for both of us. Come in, ladies. We have got work to do. What followed was 4 weeks I will not forget for the rest of my life. Bridget and I drove out to Walt's cabin every morning at first light. We sat at his table with coffee going cold beside us. We laid out May's journal, Walt's files, Bridget's notebooks, and the federal homestead papers. And we built a case the way you build a fence on the prairie. 1 post at a time, sunk deep, set straight. I took the lead on the parts that were mine. I drove into Rimrock and back roads I had only seen once before. I knocked on doors. I sat in living rooms with old people who had known my great-grandmother and listened to them tell me what they had seen and never told anyone. A neighbor named Ezra Halley remembered the day Theo Wexler had signed papers he could not read. A woman named Ola Tipton remembered the old sheriff parked in his cruiser outside May's gate 3 nights running in the spring of 1998. Most of them had never been asked. Most of them, when I asked, talked. I wrote down every word in a black notebook I had bought at the feed store with my own money. Hattie was at the counter that day. She rang me up without speaking. She did not refuse my money, but she did not look at me either. We had not spoken since the day she had stood in the hospital and told me to stay away from Beckett. I paid for the notebook and walked out and did not look back. By the 3rd week, I had 11 sworn statements. Walt notarized each one with a stamp he had kept from his sheriff's office days. He had renewed the commission privately every year since he retired. Just in case, he said. He had been a careful man his whole life. Bridget worked the paper trail. She had the eye for it. She matched dates from her notebooks to dates in May's journal, to dates in Walt's files. She built a timeline 30 years long. She put copies of every original in a fireproof box that I buried in the woods at the back of the property. Walt was the one who put it together for the law. He had spent 2.5 decades writing reports that would stand up in court. He knew which evidence was admissible. He knew which judge in Rimrock County could be trusted and which could not. Patricia Reeves, he said the morning we sat down to plan the filing. She is the only one. She was a young public defender when the old sheriff was running things. She remembers what he was. She owes nobody in the Brennan family a thing. Will she take the case? Walt almost smiled. She will not take the case, Sage. She will preside over it. I have known her 30 years. Trust me. 2 things happened in those 4 weeks that I want to tell you about. The first was Beckett. He came up the drive in his mother's old pickup on a Tuesday morning in mid-January. His shoulder was still in a brace. He moved like a man who had been told by every doctor that he should not be driving yet. He got out of the truck slowly. He walked across the yard slowly. He stopped at the porch. He did not come up the steps. He just stood there, with his hand resting on the rail. "Hattie does not know I am here," he said. I figured. I wanted to say I am sorry. For what? For not coming sooner. I looked at him, at the brace, at the careful way he was holding himself, at the cold morning air, and the fact that he had driven 30 miles on roads still half ice to stand in my yard and apologize for a thing that was not his fault. "Beckett, you saved my life under that beam. You do not owe me an apology for anything. I owe Hattie one. You owe Hattie nothing either. She is angry because she was scared. She is allowed to be." He nodded slowly. "I am coming back to work next week. Light duty. Hattie is letting me. But I will be at your fence line on Saturday morning. I have a run of posts to set before the ground freezes any harder. If you want the help." "I want the help." He nodded once more. He turned to go. "Beckett." He looked back. "Thank you." He almost smiled. He got back in his truck and drove away. The second thing was Hattie. She came up the drive on a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks later. She did not come alone. She had Pearl Stanton in the passenger seat. Pearl had driven down from Billings for the day. They got out of the truck together. They walked across the yard together. They stopped at the porch together. Hattie took her hat off and held it in both hands. "Sage Wexler, I owe you an apology I should have made a month ago. Hattie, let me say it. Beckett told me what he had been doing out here on his own time before the accident. He told me he had been driving out here for 3 months, while you and I both pretended he was only coming when I sent him. He told me the accident was nobody's fault but the barn's, and the barn's fault was the years it spent without a roof. And the years it spent without a roof were not your fault. They were the fault of every person in this town who watched your great-grandmother grow old alone and did nothing." She paused. "Including me. Hattie, I am not finished child." Pearl spoke for the first time. Her voice was thick. "Word came through the diner crowd in Billings last week about what you and Walt and Bridget have been doing out here, about what is coming for Royce. Hattie called me on Wednesday. She told me she could not stand on the wrong side of this another day. I told her I was driving down." Hattie put a hand in her coat pocket. She pulled out an envelope. She set it on the porch rail. "This is from May's account at the bank. She left it with me 11 years ago. She told me to give it to whoever from her family came home. I should have given it to you in March. I held back because I was not sure you would last the year. I was wrong. I was wrong about you, child. I was wrong about this place. I was wrong about every part of it." Inside the envelope was a check for $300 and a folded note in May's handwriting. The note said the money was for the first thing the granddaughter wanted to plant in the spring, that it was not for taxes, that it was not for the roof, that it was for one tree or one row of seeds or one small thing that would grow. "She would have wanted you to fight," Hattie said, "but she would have wanted you to plant something too. So you would remember why." I came down the porch steps. I put my arms around Hattie. She was stiff for a second, and then she put her arms around me back. She smelled like coffee and feed dust and the outdoor cold. And underneath all of that, the same soap my great-grandmother had used. When she stepped back, her eyes were wet. "Now, you tell us what you need from us," she said. "Pearl and I are not too old to fight." We filed the case in early February. Walt drove me to the courthouse in Billings on a Tuesday morning. He wore the only suit he owned, a charcoal wool from 1989 that still fit him because Walt was not a man who let himself go soft. I wore a dark green dress Pearl had bought me from a thrift store. My hair was pulled back. My hands were steady. We filed 3 things. We filed a civil suit to void the 1998 sale of the access strip from Theodore Wexler to Royce Brennan, citing dementia fraud and the Federal Homestead Trust. We filed a complaint with the State Attorney General regarding the conduct of the former sheriff in the matter of a 1998 evidence file that had been buried within 24 hours of being received. And we filed a packet sealed with the FBI field office in Salt Lake City regarding a list of 9 men who had died over 15 years on properties owned by the Brennan family. The packet contained Bridget's notebooks, Walt's files, and a sworn statement from a 36-year-old widow who had survived long enough to bring it forward. We did not file all of these in the same hour. We filed them in 3 separate offices over the course of the morning. By noon, the chain reaction had started. By the end of the week, the local paper in Billings had picked up the civil filing. By the end of the next week, a regional paper out of Denver had picked it up. By the end of February, 2 reporters had driven to Rimrock with cameras and were knocking on doors. The Brennan empire did not fall in a day. It fell the way a tree falls in a high wind that has been blowing for 30 years. Slowly. And then, all at once, Royce Brennan came to see me one more time before the trial. It was a morning in late March, the first real warm day of the year. The snow was off the south side of the porch. The first green was showing in the pasture. I was on the roof when I saw his truck come up the road. I climbed down. I met him in the yard. He did not get out of the truck this time. He rolled the window down. His face was thinner than I remembered, older, gray at the edges of his mouth. "You think you have me," he said. "I do not think anything, Mr. Brennan. I am just a girl trying to fix a roof. My lawyers will eat that little man Doolittle alive. My lawyer is not Walt. Walt is a witness. My lawyer is a woman named Margaret Holcomb, who is doing this work for $25 and a handshake." His jaw tightened. "I made your great-grandmother 3 serious offers in her life. She turned down all of them. The last one was for $150,000. She would have died comfortable. She chose to die in a falling-down house out of spite. She chose to die in her own house. There is a difference." He looked at me a long time. "I will offer you $50,000. Drop everything. Sign a release. Walk away. No. 75. No. 100. Mr. Brennan." He stopped. "My great-grandmother kept a list of every offer you ever made her. Did you know that? She wrote down the date and the figure and what you said. Every time. She kept it in a journal. She did not negotiate with you because she was not for sale. She was not for sale because the land is not the only thing my family has. We have her name. We have what she left us. We have the truth about what you did to my mother. Those things are not for sale either." He stared at me. For just a second, I saw something behind those pale eyes that I had not seen before. Not fear. Not shame. He was not a man who carried shame. What I saw was the look of a man who has just understood after 30 years of believing otherwise that he does not get the last word. He rolled up the window. He drove off. He never came up my road again. The trial began on the 7th of October. The courthouse in Rimrock was small, wood-paneled walls, high windows with old brass fittings, a judge's bench made of oak that had been there since 1912, 42 seats in the gallery. Every one of them was full. People had driven down from Billings and over from Bozeman. Two old men I had never met before sat in the back row. They had grown up in Rimrock in the 1950s, and they had moved away in the 1970s, and they had come back when the news had reached them. Half the seats were taken by men over 60 who remembered exactly who Royce Brennan was and what he had done to whom. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Margaret Holcomb. She was 68 years old. She had been Patricia Reeves's law partner 30 years ago. She had retired from a firm in Denver and had come back to Rimrock for this. Walt sat in the first row of the gallery. Bridget sat beside him. Hattie and Pearl sat on the other side. Beckett sat in the second row, his shoulder heeled, his eyes calm. Finn and Hazel were not there. They were at school. Bridget would not have it any other way. Across the aisle, Royce Brennan sat with 3 lawyers. The lead lawyer was a man named Foley out of Denver. He had a reputation. He had made it grinding people like me into the floor of small county courthouses for 30 years. Margaret Holcomb was not afraid of him. I was not afraid of him either. I had been afraid of his client. The lawyer was just a man in a suit. The judge was Patricia Reeves. She looked across her bench at both tables. She struck the gavel once. "Miss Wexler, tell me how this began." I stood up. I walked to the witness chair. I sat down. I took the oath. I looked at Royce Brennan one time. Then I looked at the judge. "It started with a cardboard box," I said, "and $7. I told them everything. I told them about the orphanage, about the box of my mother's things, about the Polaroid of a young woman in front of a farmhouse with the reflection of a man on the road in the glass behind her. I told them about the auction and the $7 and the keys that crumbled in my hand. I told them about May's journal. I told them about Walt's tin trunk. I told them about 30 years of patient witness. I named every date May had recorded. Royce Brennan's first offer in 1985. His second in 1989. The Talbot Crane sale in 1992. The dementia diagnosis on Theo Wexler in 1996. The notary at Theo's kitchen table in 1998. The strip of land that controlled my access road sold for $200 to a man who could no longer recognize his own children. Margaret stood. She entered the original 1923 Federal Homestead Act papers into evidence. She entered the trust clause. She walked the judge through the federal law that meant the 1998 sale had been void on the day it was signed. Foley objected. He was overruled. She entered the journal. Foley objected. Overruled. She entered Walt's files. Foley objected. Overruled. She entered 11 sworn statements from neighbors who had watched and never spoken. Foley objected 11 times. He was overruled 11 times. Then I told them about my mother. I told them about a 17-year-old girl who had walked into a sheriff's office in 1998 with a folder of evidence and walked out alive only because she had run before they could find her again. I told them about a complaint that had been buried within 24 hours by the sheriff who was the cousin of the man it accused. I told them about my mother running to Nebraska, having a baby, raising me for 4 years on whatever she could find, and dying in a car accident at the age of 21, without ever seeing her grandmother again. Margaret put the buried complaint into evidence. We had a copy of it now. The court clerk, a woman in her 70s named Cora Vinland, had photocopied the complaint the night the old sheriff had told her to bury it. She had kept the copy in a sealed envelope at the bottom of a desk drawer for 20 years. She had brought it forward when she heard what we had filed. Foley objected to the chain of custody. Patricia Reeves looked at him over the rim of her glasses for a long second. "Counsel," she said, "the original was destroyed in 1998. By the man who destroyed it. We are admitting the copy. Sit down." Foley sat down. Then Walt took the stand. Walt told the truth in the slow and patient way of a man who had waited 30 years to tell it. He told them about the night the old sheriff had called him at home. He told them about the threat. He told them about driving out to May's farm and confessing what he had been ordered to do. He told them about the trunk. He told them about every name and every date and every license plate. When Foley tried to break him on cross-examination, Walt looked the lawyer in the eye and answered every question with the same calm certainty. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush. He had been a patient man for too long to be rattled by a man in a suit from Denver. At one point, Foley said, "Mr. Doolittle, are you really asking this court to believe that for 16 years after you retired, you sat in a cabin alone with a trunk full of evidence and waited for a teenage girl to walk up your road?" Walt did not move. "I am not asking the court to believe it, sir. I am telling the court it is what happened." "And why exactly did you wait?" Walt looked at me, not at the lawyer, at me. "Because May Wexler asked me to," he said. "And in this country, when a woman like May Wexler asks a man to do a thing, that man does it." The gallery was very quiet. Then Bridget took the stand. She read from her notebooks. She named the 9 men. She named her husband. She told the court in front of a packed gallery what she had learned about how the Brennan family handled the men who worked their land and saw too much. I watched the older men in the gallery as she spoke. I watched their hands, the way their hands closed slowly into fists in their laps. The way one of them, an old rancher in a bolo tie, took out a handkerchief and pressed it under his eyes and put it back in his pocket without ever changing his expression. The room was very quiet when Bridget finished. The trial ran for 4 days. On the 4th day, Margaret called her last witness. It was not a witness anyone had expected. It was a man named Lyle Coulter. He was 47 years old. He was Royce Brennan's foreman. He had worked on the Brennan Ranch for 19 years. He had walked into Walt's cabin 3 weeks before trial, had set a Zippo lighter on the table, and had said he wanted to talk. Margaret had taken his statement. Walt had notarized it. Margaret had not put him on the witness list until the morning he was called, because she had been afraid of what would happen to him if his name went down on paper too soon. Lyle Coulter sat in the witness chair and told the court that he had hired the man who had come to my barn with a can of gasoline on a night in early November. He had been ordered to do so by Royce Brennan. He had a tape of the conversation. He had recorded it on his phone in the cab of his own truck on the morning the order was given. The judge ordered the tape played in court. When it was done, Patricia Reeves looked across her bench at Royce Brennan with the kind of face I would not wish on any man. She did not strike the gavel right then. She let the silence sit there for a long time. Then she called a recess. When we came back in, Foley asked for a sidebar. The 2 lawyers and the judge spoke quietly at the bench for almost 20 minutes. I could not hear what they said, but I watched Foley's shoulders. They started straight. They ended bent. When he came back to his table, he leaned over to Royce Brennan and spoke to him for a long minute. I watched Royce's face. He shook his head once. He shook it again. The 3rd time, he stopped shaking it. He looked down at his hands on the table. Foley stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "we would like to enter into discussions regarding a stipulated judgment on the civil matters." Patricia Reeves nodded slowly. "Court is in recess until tomorrow morning at 9. Counsel my chambers in 10 minutes. She struck the gavel. The verdict came down the next afternoon. The 1998 sale of the access strip was void. Title returned to the Wexler estate. The civil case against Royce Brennan for fraud, intimidation, and arson was decided in my favor on every count. The judge awarded damages in an amount Margaret had warned me would never be collected, because by the time the case was finished, Royce Brennan was not going to have anything left to collect from. She was right. The federal grand jury convened in Salt Lake City the following spring. The indictment ran to 63 pages. It charged Royce Brennan with wire fraud, witness intimidation, and conspiracy in matters related to the deaths of 9 ranch workers over 15 years. He was not convicted of murder. He had good lawyers and money, and a federal jury that could not be made certain enough on the murder charges to send him to prison for the rest of his life. But he was convicted of the fraud and the intimidation. He served 4 years in a federal facility in Colorado. While he was there, his wife divorced him. 2 banks called in loans. The ranch went into receivership. By the time he was released, there was no Brennan Cattle Company. There were no 2,000 acres along the river. There was a small house in a small town in eastern Wyoming, where a man in his late 60s lived alone and did not come back to Rimrock County ever again. I did not see him after the day he drove away from my yard. I am told by people who saw him in court that he never looked at me once during the 4 days of trial. I am told that he never spoke my name again for the rest of his life. We started calling it the Lighthouse in the 2nd year, though no one on the property called it that. The name came from town, from the diner, from the feed store, from the truckers who passed on the long highway south of the river. I had taken to leaving a lantern in the front window every night, burning from dusk until dawn. It had started one cold December evening when I had been thinking about Bridget's car sliding off the road in the storm, and how easy it had been for them to almost not see my house in the dark. Word traveled. People started saying that if you were coming over the ridge from the north, you could look for the light in the Wexler window. That was how you knew you were almost home. Then they started saying that if you were passing through and you needed a meal or a bed, or a quiet place to sit out a storm, the light was on at the Wexler farm. They would not turn you away, and I did not. A widow from Billings, whose husband had died and who could not afford rent, stayed in the spare room for 6 weeks until she found her feet. A family passing through to Idaho with a broken-down car stayed a month while we fixed their engine and they helped with planning. A boy of 17 aging out of the system the way I had stayed for 3 years until he saved enough working at the feed store with Hattie to enroll in a community college in Bozeman. I did not advertise. I did not put up a sign. The light in the window was the only sign. But people found it. 3 years after I bought this farm for $7, I stood under the oak tree my great-great-grandmother had planted in 1925. It was autumn again. The leaves were turning gold and red and dropping one by one onto the grass. Behind me, the house stood solid and strong, its roof intact, its walls white in the late sun, its windows glowing with light. In the distance, I could hear Hazel laughing as she chased chickens across the yard. Finn was helping Bridget in the garden. Beckett's truck was parked by the barn where he was working on something he would not show me yet, as if he knew I was thinking about him. Beckett appeared in the barn doorway. He raised a hand in greeting. I waved back. 3 years ago, he had been a stranger who had helped me load tarps into a truck. Now he was something else. He walked toward me slow and easy the way he did everything. When he reached the tree, he stood beside me close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "You okay?" he said. "Yes, just thinking. About you." He did not say anything, but the corner of his mouth turned up just a little. "Hattie wants us for dinner Sunday," he said. "She is making pot roast." "Us." That is what she said. Us. I looked at him, at the way the autumn light caught in his dark hair, at the steadiness in his eyes, the same steadiness that had been there from the first day. "Okay," He smiled. A real one. The kind that changed his whole face. Okay. We stood under the oak tree watching the leaves fall. Not needing to say anything else. I had family now. Not blood family. Real family. The kind you choose. The kind that chooses you back. I pulled the last letter from my pocket. The one I had never shown anyone else. The one I had found tucked into the back cover of May's journal, in an envelope marked simply for whoever finds this place. The letter was short. I had read it so many times by then that I knew it by heart. It told whoever found this place that the land had held our family for 100 years, through hard times and good. It said the land would hold the reader too. It asked just one thing. Keep the light on. Not for yourself, for whoever comes after. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in my pocket. I looked up at the sky, at the clouds, at the geese flying south for the winter. I am home, Grandma, I said, and I am not going anywhere. That night, after the dishes were done and Finn and Hazel were asleep, and Bridget had gone to bed with a book she had been reading for a week, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the lantern burn in the window. The road from town was dark. The wind was small. Somewhere out there, a coyote called once and then was silent. A pair of headlights came over the rise about a mile out. They were moving slowly. They were weaving the way headlights weave when somebody behind the wheel has been driving too long without sleep. The car stopped at the bottom of my drive. A door opened. A figure got out. A boy, maybe 17 years old, in a thin coat with a backpack over one shoulder, and a tiredness in his walk that I recognized before I could see his face. He came up the drive slowly. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He was looking at the lantern in the window. I heard, he said. His voice was hoarse. I heard there is a place out here, where the light is on. I stood up. I came to the top of the steps. The lantern light caught his face. He was thin. His coat was too small. His eyes were the eyes of every kid I had ever been. Come in, I said. You are home now. He started to cry. He tried not to. He could not help it. I put my hand on his shoulder and led him through the front door into the warm yellow light of the room my great-grandmother had kept ready for 60 years. The wind moved softly across 80 acres of land that had once cost $7. The lantern burned in the window, and somewhere in whatever quiet place she had gone to, I hoped May Wexler could see it. I hoped she knew. The granddaughter she had been waiting for had come home. The light she had asked me to keep was still on. It would always be on, for whoever came next.